How do we respond to what the world brings to our doorstep? And I think this is what's so important, because we're conditioned to believe that we are powerless beings, that we are weak in the presence of external influences. And when we feel that weakness, we become victims. And as victims, we need to turn to something outside of our bodies to save us. What the new science, the best science of the modern world, is showing reflects the wisdom of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, the traditions of the indigenous people that I've had the opportunity to spend so much time with, the words that help us to change the way we feel about ourselves in the presence of whatever the world is showing us out there. The words that literally shift our perceptions. And what you're going to see is that the words are much more than simply vibrations that we make to express ourselves. There's a chemical component. There's an emotional component. There's a psychological component. Certainly there's a spiritual component. So there is a place where science and spirituality, ancient wisdom, and everyday life come together in a really beautiful way. And that's what the wisdom codes are really all about. It's what this module is all about. Module 1, the words are the codes. What we're beginning to understand is that when we speak a word, it sets into motion an entire process that we are so accustomed to experiencing and we're so masterful at doing, we seldom give it another thought. So modern science tells us that the average person in their mind speaks between 60,000 and 80,000 words every day of our lives. Sometimes the words are a lot of the same. There's a lot of repetition. But those words are programs. We're telling ourselves something 60 to 80,000 times a day. And those words, they affect our immune system. They affect our heart rate variability. They affect our blood pressure. They affect the chemistry in our bodies. But they even go beyond that. The words have the power to actually upregulate and downregulate the genes of our DNA that create the template, that form the very template for the essence of our being, just from a word. Wow. When you really think about it, words are very, very important, whether we speak them or whether we think them. So I think, as I mentioned, that most of us intuitively, we sense that there's more to our words. And I just want to give you an example. You know, the poet, Emily Dickinson, she may have said this the best. She said, and this is a direct quote, she said, "I know nothing in the world that has as much power as a word." Okay, that's not science. That's intuitive. But I think we reflect that. They are determining how we think about our lives, but it doesn't stop there. Because the words that you and I use actually determine what we are even capable of thinking about.
To experience, not just talk about, but to experience the healing language in the field of intelligent energy that connects everything, the field that is now being called the divine matrix. How many are familiar with a brilliant teacher named Neville? He was an early 20th century teacher and philosopher, simply went by the name Neville. He wrote a book in 1952. It was called The Power of Awareness. It's a simple book. Each chapter is about a page and a half long, and you'll read that chapter and you'll think about it for 2 weeks. Really powerful stuff. 1952, Neville wrote The Power of Awareness, and his stated intention, he said, the reason I am writing this book is, quote, he said, to reveal our infinite power against which no earthly force is of the slightest significance. Think about that. Do you believe you have a power within you over which no earthly force is of the slightest significance? Do you honestly believe that? Do you want to believe it? Let me ask that. Do you want to believe it? That's all it takes. Because if I can share with you, together we can give our left brain a reason to think differently about ourselves. Our left brain then steps out of the way and frees up our hearts to experience the power and the passion of what that's all about. Neville described this power in us, and he used a catch-all term called belief. And I know you all have heard a lot about belief. I just want to give you an example of the power of the belief that Neville talks about. He gives case history after case history, true story after true story of the power of belief and the miraculous things that can happen. And one of the most poignant for me, he was notified of a young man who had been diagnosed by Western medical doctors with what they called an irreversible heart condition, and he was dying. And he had every reason to live. He had a beautiful wife. He had 2 beautiful, beautiful children. And he was in his 20s. And Neville went to his bedside, and the man didn't want to die. But he was so weak by the time Neville got to him. In Neville's words, the man had shrunk to almost a skeleton. He said he couldn't even speak. All he could do was nod his head in recognition of what Neville would say to him. And Neville began to ask the man, rather than wanting his healing or praying for his healing to happen. If you pray for something to happen, what have you just implied? Think about it. If you're asking for it to be present, even when it's well-intentioned, you may actually be acknowledging the fact that the healing isn't there already. Please let that healing happen. It means it's not there right now. We'll talk more about that. Neville asked the man, he said, I know you can't speak. He said, do this. Experience yourself as already healed. Not getting healed or on the way to being healed or the long, slow process of thinking about the possibility that you're maybe going to begin the healing process, because that's our conditioning, is that things take a long time, that they're slow and changing. Neville said, experience yourself already healed. He said, when the doctor comes in your mind, see this happening again and again. See the doctor looking at his chart in amazement and saying to himself, it's a miracle that this man is healed. 6 weeks later, Neville visited the man in his home. The man got up and walked out of the room a couple of days later. The doctor said it was an unexplained, spontaneous miracle. So they put that in a little pile and they say, we'll come back and study that later. But first, we've got to cure cancers and we've got to cure heart conditions, because it doesn't make sense. There's a disconnect in the Western medical model when you see that. Neville asked the man to experience himself as if he was already healed. How much power does belief really have? Maybe any firewalkers in here? Anyone here done the powerful firewalks? Amanda Dennison of Alberta, Canada, entered the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest firewalk on Earth. Now, I've seen firewalks 12, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 feet long. She was twice that. What she did was this. She crossed a 220-foot pit with temperatures averaging over 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. 220 feet, unscathed, not a blister on her foot. And I'm not recommending that you try something like this unless you're really prepared to do it. And firewalkers that I've known said if in the middle of that pit, if a doubt enters your mind, it's all over. You have perceived that your parents were angry at you. That what was really happening is you were feeling your perceived Creator's anger at you. Is it possible that when your parents are proud of you, and when they encourage you, and it feels so good that you're actually feeling that from your Creator? Is that possible? If the mirrors work and if they hold, I believe this is precisely what's happening. I believe there's a good possibility that we love on levels unspoken and so deeply that we will impeccably hold these mirrors to one another. And our parents have done precisely this for us. So I'm not saying that this is an excuse or a condoning for any patterns of behavior that our parents have ever demonstrated, and we'll go into this whole thing. I'm simply asking you to allow for the possibility that the relationship that you've had with those who have cared for you, your parents, maybe you were adopted, maybe you were in foster homes, whoever it was that assumed that responsibility for you, they have held the mirror, allowing you to see. We don't get up in the morning and say, I wonder how my relationship with my Heavenly Creator is going today. Typically, we don't do that. We're focused in living and breathing and surviving and providing for one another in this world, and it's in this world where we see the mirrors exemplified. So I'm asking you to allow for the possibility that those who have consented to care for you in this world, possibly on an unspoken level in that caring, that they've held this mirror, and this mirror has shown you your beliefs and your expectations of
how you believe your Creator sees you and how you see your Creator. How do you feel about the possibility that your parents have held this mirror for you? Does it make any sense, first of all? Let's try something. Let's try something. I invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Deep yogic breath. Yogic breath is where you push your tummy out. When you inhale, that means your diaphragm just dropped. Okay, and then pause briefly. Don't be in such a big hurry to get rid of that breath. And when you do exhale, tighten your tummy muscles a little bit. Just take a deep yogic breath. Okay. Now in your mind, I'll invite you to say to yourself, to consent to feeling in your mind. In your mind, say, I consent to feel. I allow myself to feel. I have just told the universe that rain does not exist here. The moment I pray for it to happen, I'm acknowledging that it's not here now. And I said, well, if you didn't pray for rain just now, I said, when you close your eyes, what did you just do? And he said, when I closed my eyes, he said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like when it rains in my Pueblo village. He said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like to stand with my naked feet in the mud, and the mud is there because there's been so much rain. He said, I smelled the smells of what the rain smells like when it rolls off the earthen walls from our Pueblo, and I felt what it would feel like to walk through the corn that's this high against my naked chest, and it's this high because there's been so much rain to grow the corn, and then I give thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened. All right, can you see now, through everything that we have explored, everything we've discovered in this series, can you see what David has just done? He's brought together so many of the concepts. He's acknowledging that there's a field out there, number one, that he's communicating with that field. He's acknowledging that the feeling is the language that the field recognizes. It's not so much about the words. The words can be spoken. However, if the words are spoken, the goal is to create the feeling. All right? And he's acknowledging that he has the potential as a man, a human, in the presence of this field to reach inside of the field into the realm of all things that are possible and isolate the possibility of his choice and collapse that potential into something real in our world. And he's doing it through a very sophisticated internal technology that we call the lost mode of prayer. It is a feeling-based prayer. The key, feeling as if the prayer is already answered, coming from the outcome. There is a huge difference between working toward the outcome a little at a time and beginning with the outcome. And you've probably seen this huge difference in your life as a child. I know that I did. For example, I was told when I was young, if I scrape my knee on the sidewalk, that the healing is going to happen slowly, gradually, over a period of time. And you know what? Sure enough, that's exactly the way it happened. I would look and expect, my mom told me, she said, every day it's going to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And I'd look, and she was right. It was getting a little better, a little better, and a little better. Is it possible that when we look at our bodies with that kind of expectation, that the healing actually reflects, it mirrors our expectation? And if that is true, what would happen if we begin with the outcome? I want to tell you, I've done this in my life, and it has worked. And that's why I can sit here and look at you right now, and I can tell you, I know that this modality of prayer works. And when we talk about prayer, we're talking about this as a code interacting with creation. This has nothing to do with any religion whatsoever. And I want to be really clear about that. Although religions have wrapped the rules and the dogma around these deeply spiritual principles in the past, and actually led to people in some respects feeling further from their power. It has disempowered the people, the rules and the dogma. So we're cutting right through the rules and the dogma. We're going to the essence of our most ancient and cherished spiritual technology. It's about the relationship between you and me, the field, the earth, the heavens, the cosmos, and our bodies. So I've had the opportunity to begin my healing from the place where we are conditioned to think that it leads, to feel the feeling as if the healing has already happened.
and other programs I've talked about this. I went through a physical in the year 2000. There was a tumor inside my bladder that doctors wanted to operate on physically. I acknowledged that. I applied everything that I had learned in my life, and I really applied it. I didn't just kind of apply it. I lived the deepest truth, the existence of everything that I'm saying to you in this program, and it takes work. It takes work to do that. And I did that work, and when I went back, fully prepared for surgery if it was needed, what the doctors found was there's no need for the surgery. But I've done this with cuts and scrapes as well. Our bodies will respond. We're part of the field. We're emerging from this field, and we communicate with the field in a language that recognizes emotion, feeling, just like David did with the rain. Then the field responds.
The blessing is simply the acknowledgement. When you say, I bless the person who has just been dishonest with me. I bless the person who has violated my trust, betrayed my confidence. And you say that again and again, and you say it out loud. What begins to happen is the verbal expression brings the physical energy up from the heart into the body. And soon your body becomes warm and you have tears in your eyes and you say, I bless this person, I bless this person. And it is the blessing that relieves the charge of the judgment for just a moment. And that's all we need. Because for just a moment, when the charge is relieved, we can replace the hurt with something else. And the ancients say that that something else is what we call beauty. Beauty is a powerful force in our world, and it already exists everywhere. The ancient Essenes and the Native Americans alike, they say that beauty is already everywhere in everything. Our job is to find that beauty, to seek it out. Now, Mother Teresa was a master at this. She would walk down the streets of Calcutta, India, and she would see dead bodies on the street and decay in the gutters. And in the dung in the gutter of the streets in Calcutta, she would find a flower growing, and in that flower she would find beauty in the streets. And that experience allowed her the strength to find even more beauty in life. So rather than judging the experiences, when they come to us, if we can look at each experience as a blessing, and when we find ourselves hurt, say, again, yes, I feel hurt, so acknowledge it first. Secondly, what is this hurt saying to me? What voice am I hearing? What does it tell me about my life? And bless the hurt now that is giving us information about ourselves. As we begin that experience, it is much easier then for our thoughts, feelings, and emotions to become one so that we can move that mountain when it comes across our paths. When one person or a group of people come together and they share a common experience in their heart, for a period of time, such as the International Peace Project in the Middle East, where people came together to feel the feelings of peace during the Lebanese-Israeli War in the early 1980s. During the time they created those feelings, statistically, terrorist activities dropped to zero, crimes against people declined, emergency hospital room visits declined, traffic accidents declined. And so the scientists ask, if this prayer is so powerful, then why didn't it last? And this is the crux, the secret of the ancient traditions that has been missed by so many people today. Because this experience in our heart was viewed by the scientists as something you do for a moment in time. So you go about your daily life, and at a certain time, you stop your daily life and you do this heart experience, this prayer. And when the prayer is over, you stop the prayer and go back to your life. And the crux of our most cherished, sacred, and ancient traditions is very clear that this experience of the heart is not something that we do. It is something that we become. It is something that we live in our lives. Life becomes the prayer. Every moment of every day is the prayer. And because this modality of prayer, it's called the lost mode of prayer, feeling-based prayer, because the prayer is based in a feeling, and we can have a feeling all the time. We can have a feeling in our cars, driving on the highway. We can have a feeling in the office, in the school, with our families, alone in the park. We can always have a feeling, and that means we can always be in prayer.
There was a cache of ancient documents that were found. I'll just tell you the story. They were found
by a young boy whose job it was to go and find something to burn so that his family could have heat and cook on their stove. There aren't a lot of forests along the Nile River in Egypt. This young boy is very creative, and he ended up opening up old tombs and finding documents in tombs that became the kindling and the firewood for his family's stove. Apparently he had done this in the past. Well, he found one particular tomb, and in this tomb was a cache of books. 13 codices is what they were called, containing 52 Gnostic and Christian writings. And this collection of documents became known, it was named after the location it was found, became known as the Nag Hammadi Library. It is especially controversial because there was an editing that was done in the Christian traditions in the 4th century during the time of the Emperor Constantine, where a number of biblical books that had been used prior to the 4th century were removed. And the ones that were left were condensed and rearranged into what we call the modern Bible. So let me share this with you, and then let's take a deeper look at the layers of meaning in this particular gospel. The Master Jesus, he said, quote, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." And I think we can see now why that would be. If we bring forth the love that is within us, the depth, the capacity of that love to transcend any of the suffering or any of the hurt, it heals us psychologically, it heals us emotionally, it heals us physically, it heals us spiritually. But if we don't, if we bury our hurt, then those chemicals stay in the organs of the body that we associate with our pain. They stay in the heart, they stay in the lungs, they stay in whatever organs they are that we associate with our suffering, and they remain maybe for a lifetime to become inflamed, to become diseased. We are opening a channel to move beyond judgment and beyond the polarity of the mind. And here's what I mean by that. I think you all know that the brain is a polarity organ. There's a left hemisphere, a right hemisphere. There's a left brain and a right brain. If we try to solve our problems, when we try to heal our relationships, and when we try to use these wisdom codes from the mind only, look at what happens. In the polarity organ, you're always going to have left brain, right brain. You're always going to have good and bad.
Following is a brief anatomy of this prayer, describing the meaning of refuge itself and 4 underlying principles that give us varying degrees of refuge in our daily lives. The meaning of refuge. The traditional Buddhist texts describe different kinds and varying degrees of refuge that we may seek over the course of our lives. With respect to Wisdom Code 2, the word refuge can initially mean protection from suffering by turning to ways of thinking and living that reflect the teachings of the Buddha. And this kind of refuge is described as taking the form of 3 objects or principles: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly or Sangha. The English translation of this timeless wisdom code is spoken as follows, quote, "In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment," end of quote. In the Sanskrit language that was the code's origin, each fragment of the wisdom code begins with the word Namo, meaning homage or reverence. With this in mind, the code in original Sanskrit is spoken as follows: Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Wisdom Code 3, the Lord's Prayer. The abbreviated version of Wisdom Code 3 states, quote, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth," end of quote. This code addresses the need for personal protection on both a physical and a spiritual level,
The source of this code is translated from the original Syriac dialect of an ancient Aramaic gospel. It is a shortened, standalone version of the longer original prayer that appears in the biblical book of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 9 through 13, and in a briefer version in the book of Luke, chapter 11, verses 2 through 4. The Lord's Prayer, also on occasion known as the Our Father prayer, is arguably the best known and most widely used ancient word code in the Christian tradition. The version of the Lord's Prayer in Gospel Q represents its oldest version, in which are preserved what are believed to be the original words that Jesus shared with his followers, and it's for this reason that I've chosen the English translation closest to the original words of Jesus' time as possible, which was prepared by George M. Lomsa early in the 20th century. The Lord's Prayer reflects the complete structure of the universal code, and it's for this reason that this revered wisdom code is seen as a template, as the prayer of prayers. For your convenience, I'll summarize the full English translation of the original Syriac version of Wisdom Code number 3, followed by the original Aramaic words as follows. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. Give us bread for our needs from day to day, and forgive us our offenses, as we have forgiven our offenders. And do not let us enter into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the Aramaic, Abun de Boashmaya, Nid Kadash Samach, Te Maukuta, Nehwe Te Yanak Aikana, de Boashmaya Avbara, Avlan Lakma de Sun Kanan Yoman, Washbuklan Haben Wa Tain, Akayana Dahanan Shwahan Lahayaben, Uelata Lanla Nesuna, Elapatsa Min Bisha, Metul Dilak Amaukuta, Wahaila Wash Bukta, La Alam Amin. Amen. Wisdom Code 4, the Gayatri Mantra. In its entirety, Wisdom Code 4 states Brahma, the manifestation of spiritual energy, destroyer of sufferings, embodiment of happiness, bright like sun, destroyer of sins, divine intellect who may inspire. This mantra, which is known as the Gayatri Mantra, addresses personal protection as well as the need to clear personal obstacles in our lives. The Vedic prayer of refuge, known as the Gayatri Mantra or the Great Mantra, is so revered in the Hindu tradition that it's often referred to as the mother of the Vedas. The original source of the Gayatri Mantra is the most ancient of the Vedic texts, the Rig Veda. The Gayatri Mantra has a long and complex past. Its 3,800-year history includes multiple translations that reflect the varied interpretations of the translators throughout that time. The following interpretation is from Hindu scholar Swami Vivekananda. He lived from 1863 and he died in 1902. Once again, because there is no direct correspondence between the words of Sanskrit and those of the English language, any translation of the Gayatri Mantra is only an approximation of the original language and intent. So with this in mind, Swami Vivekananda's interpretation of the mantra's general meaning is as follows. Quote, we meditate on the glory of that being who has produced this universe. May he enlighten our minds. End of quote.
There are stories that Mother Teresa, she would walk down the streets of Calcutta, and amidst the bodies and the filth and the stench and the decay on the streets and the sidewalks and the alleys, she would find cow dung in the gutter, and in the cow dung find a lily or a daisy growing from that cow dung, and in that lily or that daisy she would find beauty in the streets of Calcutta. And from that example, we learn how we can find beauty or we can find love anywhere, in any situation, regardless of what's happening in our world today. Through our example, if you think the same thought of war, and rather than hating the war, just simply feeling the love in your heart for this world, for your life, for this planet, what happens is the feeling, rather than being one of anger, becomes one of perhaps compassion or maybe sadness. Different words that describe the feeling for different people. But war and love give us a very different feeling than war and hate. So from the perspective of the instructions left to us by Isaiah and the ancients in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're reminded that through the power of thought, feeling, and emotion in our bodies, we have the ability to massage the language that we radiate to the world around us, the power to interact, to participate in the events of our lives in ways that are perhaps unexpected and surprising to many. In the language of the West today, the words, the English words that best describe the quality of feeling that we would most like to have in our hearts, the English words that best describe the kind of feeling that optimizes the chemistry in our bodies, the peace of the world around us, are the words appreciation and gratitude. Appreciation and gratitude. We must become in our lives, in our hearts, in our beliefs, the very things that we choose to experience in our world. As we hold the thoughts for the healing of our loved ones, or the healing of our bodies, or the success of our careers, or the abundance of our lives, the peace of our world, as we hold that thought and our love for those things, feel for us what are the feelings of appreciation and gratitude. In that way, we are speaking the language of the mind of God, the language of the quantum hologram that has the direct measurable effects on the world around us. 500 years before the time of Jesus, a man walked the earth and shared his message with us, describing precisely this internal technology. His name was Buddha. What was Buddha's message? If you could encapsulate his message in 1, 2, 3 words, what words would describe the quality that Buddha invited us to bring into our lives? Well, words like compassion, gratitude, and love. What Buddha said to us in the language of his time, he didn't try to explain why our world works the way it works. He simply said to us, if you live your lives the way that I am sharing with you now, you'll change your body. And when you change your body, you'll change the world. 500 years after the time of Buddha, another man walked the earth, and his name was Jesus. And Jesus had a very similar message. It was a message of compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, and love. Jesus said to us in the language of his time, he said, live your lives the way that I am describing, as I am sharing with you now, and your lives will change. And he said, when your lives change, the world will change. And Jesus took it one step further. He said, here, I'll show you. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, world, give me the worst that you can give me, and I will show you that even your worst I will transcend by the choice I make in my life. And I believe that is the value, that's the power of the message that was left to us.
So I'm just giving you some examples of how powerful this state is, and why we would want to access this very powerful state on demand. So with all these benefits in mind, the obvious question is, how do we do it? How do we access this powerful state of consciousness? And this is one of those places where my direct experience in Tibet give me the opportunity to answer this question firsthand. So in season 1 of this series of Missing Links, I described the 1991 discovery of the 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart, sensory neurites, that are focused in the heart in a way that is called the little brain of the heart. It is a neural network, but it's not in the brain, it's in the heart. These sensory neurites are essentially brain cells
but they're not in the brain, but they function the way that brain cells do. They think, they feel, they remember independently of our cranial brain. And when I shared that with you, I also opened the door to the potential for the gamma brain state. Here's what I mean by that. In season 1, I shared a technique that's been developed in the laboratory that reflects what some of our most ancient and indigenous traditions have taught us about harmonizing the heart and the brain, 2 organs, into a single potent system in our body. So what we're really doing is we are harmonizing the neurons in the brain and the neurons in the heart. Two separate organs, the neurons are in 2 places. We're harmonizing them into a single potent system called heart-brain harmony, or more specifically, heart-brain coherence. So if this is new to you, I'm going to invite you to go back to season number 1 of Missing Links and check out the episodes where we're talking about harmonizing the heart and the brain and the specific techniques. I'm going to refer to them here, but I detail them, and I want you to know that detail is there. I'm not just glossing over this. So now that we understand that it's possible to harmonize the heart and the brain, and that through breath and focus, we may create this very, very powerful state of coherence between the heart and the brain. Coherence is defined as 0.1 hertz. When we can create a signal between the heart and the brain of 0.1 hertz, we are in this optimal place where our body senses that all systems are enabled. It's in this place where we are at our best. And this is no secret. Athletes at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs are using these techniques to optimize their physical performance at very high rates of metabolism. This isn't something you have to do when you're in a deep meditative state and completely relaxed. U.S. military is using the techniques, very techniques I'm sharing with you now, to hone the focus of our men and women before they go into combat to optimize their opportunities for success, but also when they return from combat to help them to reintegrate into their homes and their families and leave the reflexes, the battlefield reflexes behind, serve them in the battlefield, but they don't necessarily serve them when they return to their homes. So this is an optimum state, all systems go, all right? Now, in this state, one of the techniques that I shared with you was to create an emotional experience, a feeling, and the feelings that I recommended from the laboratory, the Institute of Heart Math in Northern California is developing these techniques and honing these techniques so that we can do these things in our living room, so we don't have to go to a monastery in a mountaintop at high elevation half a world away to do it. One of the techniques that I offered was to feel the feeling, one of 4 feelings, to create that 0.1 hertz. Gratitude, appreciation, care, or compassion. Compassion is the key. Compassion is one of the doorways to the gamma brain state.
I'll share with you, Albert Einstein, and again, a lot of people are surprised. I'm going to give you a direct quote from him. He said, quote, "We live in a world which exists independently of us human beings." So he believed that we are separate from everything out there. He said, the world stands before us like this great eternal riddle, partially accessible to our inspection and thinking. So what he's saying is, we're separate, and we're lucky if we get to understand a little bit of it. Okay, so that was Albert Einstein's perspective, and it was a problem for him. On his deathbed, he was still trying to work the equations to unify all of the fields of physics into one eloquent equation that would describe our relationship to the universe, and he couldn't do it because he did not acknowledge the existence of the field that connects all things and us being part of that. And listen to what Wheeler said about our relationship to the field. That we are building the universe as we go. I'm going to give you a direct statement that he made that is so powerful. He said, we live in what he called a participatory universe. End of quote. Quote, we live in a participatory universe. End of quote. I love this because it means that we are not imposing our will, we are not controlling the world, but we are part of what it is that's happening. What Wheeler was saying is he couldn't imagine a universe that doesn't exist without us because the act of us observing the universe is what's building the universe. Now, I'm going to
expand on this just a little bit because it's going to be very important for this particular wisdom code. What Wheeler said, I'm just going to take you a little bit deeper into these implications. It's so powerful. If we are in a participatory universe, and the act of us looking at the universe is as important as what he is saying, here's what it means. We're building telescopes to look to the edge of the universe. We keep looking for the edge of the universe. How far does it go? Where does it end? And we keep building more powerful microscopes and building the superconducting supercolliders to find the smallest particles of matter. How small can we go? What John Wheeler is telling us is that we'll never find the edge of the universe. This is where science is right now. And it goes back to another experiment that was done early in the 20th century. Many of you know this, called the very famous double slit experiment. Double slit experiment is where scientists discovered that electrons behave one way when they're not being observed. They are waves of information. However, when they're being observed, it could be a human watching, it can be a camera watching. The act of them being observed, the waves collapse into particles. So the act of observation influences matter and how it behaves in our universe, in our world. So this is very important. It's important for where we're going to go with this because there's a field. There's a field. Now, scientists acknowledge this field, but here's what they do. When they talk about the field at conferences, they say, oh yeah, there's a field out there, and their hands go like this. There's a field out there that connects all things. Here's what they're missing. You and I are the field. We are the field. This ancient code of I will, it affirms to our body and declares to the field that we are part of the field, that we are empowered to choose. When we accept our place in the field, that's very different from feeling separate from the field. When you accept that you are the field.
Have you seen martial artists when they demonstrate their focus by breaking a concrete block? Have you seen that? You've all seen that before, right? Okay, here's the secret. Here is the secret to breaking that block. When the martial artist is focused on that block, the very last thing that they are thinking is about their hand hitting the block. Because if they think about that, they know it will hurt. So they focus on what happens after their hand has passed through the block, as if it has already happened. They focus on a place below the block and feel the feeling as if their hand is already in that place. That is a metaphor, that is an equivalent for what we're doing with the power of emotion. Feeling as if the experience has already happened. When I left the corporations as an engineer, I moved into the high desert in the United States, a place called Nuevo Mexico, about 3,000 meters above sea level is where my home is. And there are indigenous people, native people in that area in the early 1990s. And it was during this time that this part of our country was experiencing the worst drought in over 100 years. No rain during this time. And a native friend of mine called me one day and he said, Gregg, would you like to come with me to a place, a very special place, where my ancestors have gone for many, many years to pray rain? So would you like to come with me to pray rain? Now I like the language that he used, because he said this place is special because the skin between the worlds is very thin in this place. I like that language. So I met my friend, and we went to this place, and it was a circle of stones, kind of like this. Not this exact place, but very similar to this place. Now, I was not prepared for what I saw, because I believed I would see some dancing, some chanting, some singing, some Native American stuff. And that's not what happened at all. My friend sat down and took off his old shoes. With his naked feet, he stepped into the stone circle. He honored his past. He said the words, "All of my ancestors, all of my ancestors, all of my ancestors are with me now." And then he closed his eyes and he held his hands in a prayer mudra like this. And he turned his back to me for about 20 seconds. And then he looked at me and he said, "I'm hungry. Would you like to go get food?" And I said, "Yes, but I thought you were going to pray for rain." And this is when he looked at me and he said, "No." He said, "If I pray for rain, rain could never happen." He said, because the moment you pray for something, you have just acknowledged it is not here now. If you say, "Dear God, please let there be rain. Please let there be healing in my loved ones. Please let there be peace in the world. Please let my soulmate come into my life." If you say that, what you're acknowledging is that it is not here now. You remember, the divine matrix is very literal. If you say, "Please let," the divine matrix says, "Okay, I will let and let and let," because there is no completion, there is no outcome. Does that make sense? So I asked my friend, his name was David. I asked my friend David, I said, "If you did not pray for rain just now, what did you do when you closed your eyes?" Such a beautiful story. He said, "When I closed my eyes, I felt the feeling as if the rain has already happened." He said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like to feel my naked feet in the mud in my Pueblo because there has been so much rain." He said, "I smelled the smell of what it smells like when the rain falls off of the earthen Pueblo walls in our village." And he said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like when I run through the fields of corn and the corn is so high because there's been so much rain." He said, "And then I gave thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened." So he didn't ask for the rain. Now this is interesting. When those practitioners worked on the woman with the cancerous tumor, they did not judge the tumor as right, wrong, good, or bad. They accepted it as it was, and they said, "Now we're going to make a new reality." When my friend David prayed rain, he did not judge the drought. He said, "This drought is our medicine until now, and now we will create new medicine." This is key. Feeling as if it has already happened. Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story. We had lunch that day. By the time I got back onto my property that afternoon, something began to happen that had not happened for a long time. Big black clouds were coming in from the eastern mountains, and it began to rain that afternoon. And it rained that night. It rained the next morning. It rained into the afternoon. By the evening, it had rained so much and the ground was so dry that it began to flood. The roads were flooded. The crops were flooded. The cattle were stranded. And I called my friend David on the phone and I said, "This is a mess." I said, "What in the world is going on?" And he said, that's the part of the prayer the ancestors could never really explain. It's like it's like they could get the rain to begin, but they didn't know how to tell it how much to rain. Now, I cannot prove to you scientifically that David's prayer made that rain happen. I cannot prove scientifically that those practitioners made the tumor disappear. But we can say there's a high correlation, a very high correlation between when they feel the feelings and when the change happens.
What you're feeling in your heart right now has an impact on what's happening halfway around the world. We are the collective answer to the challenges that are being given to us in Jerusalem right now, for example. This field is telling us this. It's telling us matters conscious, matters related. It is giving us the wisdom. We now, through this field, can discover whether or not consciousness is the same thing as life, and we can discover whether or not if life is necessarily human. When does the carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen of our Earth become what we call human? We have to answer these questions before we know whether or not we can go forward intelligently. And behind closed doors, this is happening. It's hard to talk about it in some scientists. It's a very, very different way of thinking. Others say we've got to do this and we've got to do it quick because our technology is pushing us to this place. Our new wisdom of this field allows new choices in science, new choices in technology, new choices in medicine, choices in peace in our world. We begin simply by honoring the principle of life, diversity, religion, and science and spirituality that led us to this point. We must honor the principles of life. That's what all these traditions have said. That's what science is finding in its own language. Honor the principle of life. We can never go wrong if we're honoring that principle. We asked the question earlier, who is the matrix of creation? Who else could it be? You and I are part of that matrix. We're not separate from it. We are a part of that matrix of creation. We are all living within the mind of God. Quantum scientists are saying this. They're finding new particles, and they are using spiritual names for those particles. The new particles, the quarks, are called the quark truth, the quark beauty, the quark up, the quark down, the quark strange, and all the anti-particles, anti-truth, anti-strange, anti-up, anti-down, anti-beauty, because the physicists have found a realm where the old ideas must change. They're finding something very new. We live within the mind of God. We can never go wrong if we're honoring that principle. And as we do that, the choices that have destroyed and denied life in the past become the choices that affirm life in our present, in our future.
And there were about 230 people in the room, and there was a gentleman who raised his hand and he said, "This is ridiculous. This does not work for me at all." So right there I knew something was going to happen. And I invited him and I said, "Are you comfortable sharing this with 229 other people in the room?" And he said, "Sure." He said, "This mirror doesn't work for me at all. Just no way." And I said, "Tell me about your father." And he says, "I don't know anything about my father. I never knew my father. He left before I was born. I don't know who my father is." And I said, "Tell me how you view your heavenly Father." And he says, "There is no God. I don't believe in God." And I said, "The mirror stands. The mirror stands. By having no father in your life, the man that deserted you mirrored, even at that young age, your belief and your expectation that there is no Father in heaven, and now your life path has been spent seeking to prove or disprove that. You've now had to come to terms within yourself as to whether or not there is a Father in heaven. And by your father leaving you early in life, he pushed you to the edge of who you believed you were and asked you to redefine that. And he said, oh my God. It's the first time he had seen it that way. My mother and I have had this discussion a lot. Her father lived to be between 94 and 96. We're not certain because he lied about his age during the Depression and then he forgot later in life. So we're not sure precisely how old he was. He just passed away in January. My mother was divorced in 66, and she spent pretty much each day of her life making a couple of trips to see her father when he was living at home, in his home. At the age of 80, he developed a condition as a male that typically affects women in their 30s. It's called myasthenia gravis. It's a condition where his body produced a chemical that would intercept the signals between his brain and his muscle. So he'd think the thought, and his muscle would never get the thought. And he required round-the-clock care and many different kinds of medications for that. And the doctors said to us at that time, we doubt that, for my mother, he said, we doubt your father will live much longer. Well, he lived until he was 94. If that condition, and they never understood why. They never really understood what kept him going all that time. Well, my grandfather just passed away in January, and Mom and I had this conversation. She said, why was my daddy here so long? It hurt him to be here. He wasn't happy in life. And I said, are you willing to look at this mirror? And I'll use this as an example. She was an only child. And all through her life, my mom has said things to me like, how can God let this happen? Or why would God allow this kind of thing? And she's questioned and pondered the existence of a creator. If the mirror holds, I believe what was being shown in that relationship was that her father, on an unspoken, perhaps an unconscious level, said to her, my daughter, I will always be there for you. I will always be there for you. And he stayed until his body would not support that any longer, proving to my mother that her father, earthly father or Father in heaven, was always there for her. And she now knows that. She got that.